don't know if that includes or excludes the Muppets, but we'll be finding out a little later. Bonnie and James, however, taking us first to the FT. But it's not the Chinese-designed nuclear reactor that you're looking at. It's this line here on Jeremy Corbyn, which will move up. City to invite Corbyn's anti-capitalists. A square mile seeks common ground.
Well,
Gosh.
I thought that was an interesting story. First of all, some of the Corbyn coverage has calmed down a bit. I was very nervous and worried about some journalists the last couple of days. They seem to have sort of been blowing their stacks, you know, and talking about this man. So now it's all sort of calmed down a bit. And the city is interested in Mr. Corbyn and Mr. McDonnell coming in to speak to them. And usually in these kind of situations, the city's pretty much further ahead and much soberer than, say, the rest of the, you know, comment on this.
Right.
They want to know what their plans are, and they want to tell them their concerns.
I was going to say, is that actually maybe more about what it's about?
They want to tell their concerns, but also the city's concerned about Brexit. They want to know where the Labour Party stands on this, because this is a very nervous issue for the city, of course, because they don't know which way this is going to go, and it's going to affect the city whichever way it goes.
Yeah.
They want to know what
I mean,
Labour leader
is this the key, however? Mark Bowley, their chairman of the Policy Resources Committee at the City of London Corporation. We're keen that the new Labour leadership understands the issues that concern city institutions, jobs in the city in particular. I mean, this is perhaps not wanting to hear from Mr. Corbyn, but telling them what
it's a preemptive strike, I think. And, you know, Gordon Brown had his famous prawn cocktail offensive on the city. This is the city doing a prawn cocktail offensive on the Labour Party. They're emphasising that the city raises £66 billion a year in tax, employs 2.1 million people all over the country, two-thirds of whom are not even in London. So it's a massive part of our economy. And the city, being canny, is saying, right, we're going to present our case to Corbyn so he can't ignore it.
Or talk to John McDonnell, perhaps, more than Mr. Corbyn.
Yes.
Well, but also the city is acknowledging, however some people might think this is a goofy choice, this is a potential government, and we want to get in there right now to let them understand where we stand. Well, I don't know who the city minister is, because Labour's always had a city minister who's dealt. Chuka Umunna was the last city minister, so I don't know who it is, but they're now.
You're right, John McDonnell must be in their sights because he's proposed a tax perhaps of 60%. He wants the Bank of England to lose its independence. Mr. Corbyn's talked in the past about a windfall tax on the banks. All things that would terrify the city. So, that, as I say, they're doing a preemptive strike. They're getting their argument in
But
first.
they're also considering them as serious because the city thought that Ed Miliband was going to be the Prime Minister.
And the irony is that perhaps his own parliamentary party doesn't take him seriously, according at least to page 2 of the Express.
Some of them,
or is this them blowing their stack again?
Well,
such a great phrase.
You know, it is, and the image as well. Some of them don't believe in Jeremy Corbyn, and they're in his front bench, which would seem to me, in any other kind of job, you wouldn't be there, would you? No,
there's supposed to be collective responsibility, and there was an extraordinary clip which you showed earlier of Charles Faulkner being interviewed by Andrew Neil, and virtually every policy that was proposed to him by Jeremy Corbyn, he said, no, I don't agree with that. The only thing that he seemed to agree with was perhaps the railways. But, I mean, it's extraordinary that he's able to express such disagreement with the leader, and perhaps it's a good thing. Mr. Corbyn says he wants to encourage debate, and clearly by employing such a staunch Blairite ally, that's what he's doing.
Well, it's interesting because some right-of-centre commentators are starting to say, no, we would never vote for this guy in a million years. However, it's interesting now that we have a government where there are different potential government where people can talk like this instead of sort of being robotic and parroting a line.
And just repeating the party line
about that
morning's hymn sheet.
And yes, exactly. And Simon Heffer, who's hardly a Corbynista, is saying that, you know, it's interesting that this man is not treating electorate like a bunch of nincompoops.
Is the difficulty, though, in terms of the mechanics, then, of politics, that if he allows this sort of open forum, if you like, he can't impose his own discipline or his own authority when he needs to?
Well, partly we're used to that kind of leadership. I don't know if that is the norm, but we're used to that. He didn't come in to power on a sort of consensus ticket in that way as well.
I absolutely agree in a objective sense. It's wonderful that he's encouraging debate. However, all the proof suggests that voters hate overt disunity. That's why the Tory party has always been so disciplined and managed to keep them all on
you
message.
know, my whole theory about that is that we may have a new electorate. We don't know that yet.
Maybe, yeah.
So all the sort of indices that we're talking about may not indicate who the people are.
It seems to be Corbyn 1, Army 0. On the front page of The Independent. Fury at General behind Corbyn mutiny threat. I mean, this was the Sundays where one of the armchair generals indicated that if he became Prime Minister, basically there'd be a bit of a sort of military coup or something.
I saw this, and, you know, someone, you know, as an American-born British citizen, anything like that would happen, this guy would be gone. So it's interesting.
In the US,
oh, yeah,
yes.
Gone. And anywhere else in the world,
Yeah.
too. So this conversation that we're still having about whoever this guy is, to me, is incredible.
What's extraordinary is that even Tory MPs are supporting Mr Corbyn. Daniel Hannan, who's a Tory MEP, no friend of the Labour Party, described the General as an idiot and said, we're not Bolivia, which is a great quote.
Well, exactly. This is an incredible thing, and yet this man remains anonymous. So this is...
Yes, I mean, I'm not in favour of a witch hunt, but there is almost a case for him to be named because it's so outrageous what he said and is potentially, you know, he's the one who's being mutinous.
Exactly.
If you are a member of our armed forces, you have to do what the government tells you to do. We're a democracy, we're not a military dictatorship.
Yeah. OK, and that's shared, of course, there with the sister paper. But more Corbyn on the front of the Metro. This is the policy issue that he tried to get out amidst all this on trains. Reclaiming the train lines, which he claims would mean better service and cheaper tickets. I mean, I'm of an age where I remember British Rail. I'm not quite sure whether that's a bit of a sort of romantic, rose-tinted view of the past.
It was always the butt of all stand-up comedians' jokes, wasn't it?
The curled-up British
Rail.
Rail.
Yes, the sandwiches, the delays, the overpricing.
But the polls, and I'm putting this in quotes, we shouldn't be talking about polls anymore so soon,
Yes.
But the polls are saying that people really... This policy is one they could get behind. And he's doing it very conservatively, if I could use that word. He'll let it happen as the...
renewal of the franchises.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although the Tories have said it's an ideological joyride that will cost the taxpayers billions, but they would say that, wouldn't they?
Wouldn't they? An ideological.
I mean, the other issue, of course, the flip side is that people say, well, it's already costing us millions, not as taxpayers, but as passengers. In the thing that's really hit people since privatisation is the inevitable escalation in the price of tickets.
Yeah, I think we would still be paying somehow, if not through fares, then through taxes. So I think somebody's got to pay for the railways.
And if we get an interest rate rise, people are paying zero interest-only mortgages. There's going to be a big problem there.
The pits are going to squeak then,
That's
aren't
going to
they?
be a big deal. So I think him talking about that is getting people interested.
Right. Financial Times. And we're going to ignore Mr Tsipras sweeping departure, well, for the moment at least. It is this story here you've spotted about the city to invite Mr Corbyn and his anti-capitalists, as it's described them, to seek common ground. Is there any common ground?
Well, this is the city being very smart, being very canny, hedging its bets, as they would, of course.
Yes, as they do.
And as they do, and bringing them into the tent, if they possibly can, to put their point of view out, particularly about bankers' tax and all the other things that the city would be worried about. It's a very, very smart move. And it is also a way for the Labour leader and the Shadow Chancellor to demonstrate even deeper whatever values or feelings they have about the financial system to bring it out.
And just to remind people, John McDonnell, who is the Shadow Chancellor, has argued for a 60% top rate of tax, opposes Bank of England independence, wants the Bank of England and the mandate to move away from inflation targets to include poverty and joblessness. So it's a bit of a different agenda.
Did he once suggest that he wanted to destroy capitalism? John McDonnell, many moons ago. Anyway, it would be an interesting meeting if that came up. But I do think it's very clever. I agree with Bonnie. Gordon Brown and Ed Balls-Hemsley had a prawn cocktail offensive where they went to try and woo the city before they became the government in '97. And this is the city doing the reverse. They're doing a prawn cocktail offensive on Jeremy Corbyn in an attempt to convince them, you know, that perhaps a windfall tax on the banks is a bad idea, perhaps a 60% tax rate is a bad idea. It's very canny PR to get your retaliation in first.
But it's also very interesting because at the same time, Labour had a city minister, and that was a way to sort of make that kind of bridge.
And we should reflect that Ed Balls has been openly critical of Ed Miliband at the elections, saying he did not send the right messages to business and the city. That, you know, that was a message that should have been perhaps indicated to the square mile. You know, we are going to be friendly.
But it's making me smile because, I mean, of course, the city thought Ed Miliband was going to be the prime minister.
Yeah.
So if he had been, everything Ed Balls is saying is moot. You
anyway.
know, so, you know, so, but
well, this may be moot in that the Express inside page 2 is indicating that Mr. Corbyn's core beliefs are being attacked from inside, with the parliamentary party not quite sure about what he's proposing.
No, it's extraordinary because the tradition is that you have collective responsibility and you never publicly disagree with each other. But Lord Faulkner today on TV seemed to take almost pleasure in enumerating the number of ways in which he disagreed with his leader. I think in a way it's very mature politics, you know, showing that it's a broad church, that it can accommodate lots of different views. However, the perceived wisdom in the past certainly has been that voters hate disunity, and the Tories have always been very disciplined, able to keep their fractures behind closed doors, if you like, and whether this will play well with voters, I'm not sure.
Well, we don't know because Mr. Corbyn is obviously shaping a new consensus. He's obviously created a new electorate that the pollsters haven't actually been able to sort of get their hands on yet and talk about, so we don't know. Although I have to say, I always talk to London taxi drivers, they're the best. And I asked them what one guy, what he liked about, he wasn't a Labour voter, he said the man just talks the way he thinks. That's what I want, we're just plain speaking. Right. We don't care if they're not all
still not sure
together.
about the shorts, though, I have to say.
Yeah, well, they've thankfully cut off the black socks this time, it seems, which was not a good idea with the trainers. But again, I mean, that obviously indicates that he's not actually particularly concerned about image as such. He's quite happy to...
And anyway, as I say, this taxi driver was saying, that's actually a plus.
A reflection.
Yes, people are happy about that.
It's weird that, because lots of people are saying, yes, it's brilliant that he's not obsessed with spin, but that almost has become a spin in itself, that he's the anti-spin candidate.
But he's not making that spin.
No, but there are people who are saying that on his behalf, and I think... OK, that's a good point, but really it's whether he can deliver and whether he can convince people with his policies that will matter.
Well, the spin seems to have come so far, as the Independent's reflecting, from within the army. And this is the comments that were made in this morning's Sunday papers at an unnamed general who'd warned that Mr. Corbyn could face mutiny if he became Prime Minister.
Well, I think he might face a court-martial himself, this general. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing to say. Bonnie rightly said earlier, in America, where the president is commander-in-chief, you would be turfed out just like that. We are a democracy, and the government tells the military what to do, not the other way around. We're not a military dictatorship. As Daniel Hannan says, we're not Bolivia.
This is not Bolivia. You don't make that sort of statement. And that actually, it was inside of a Sunday Times piece, a general piece about Corbyn. And I thought, how interesting that this didn't get to be the headline. It was just, it was about that big, but it was astonishing that someone would actually say
But I mean,
this.
just to draw some, you know, interesting parallels with history, I mean, there were those documents indicating that the intelligence services had great unease about Harold Wilson's government and that, you know, about the links with, as they saw it, Moscow.
There was allegedly even a plot within Wilson's government to dethrone him, which is absolutely extraordinary now.
But at the same time, we are a democracy. This government, or whatever government is elected by the people, they have to abide by that.
Oh,
the fact that this isn't...
I'm not supporting that
attempt
to dethrone the Prime Minister.
The fact that people are... You know, this is not a bigger story is astonishing to me.
And it's on the sister paper there as well, the Eye. But more Corbyn policy announcements at the Metro, which is really what he would have wanted the papers to have reflected on. But the Metro does take this on, and this is the idea about, as he called it, People's Railway. A renationalisation, but as you were pointing out, Bonnie, by stages. It's when the franchises come up for renewal.
When the franchises come up, then he'll sort of bring them back in. The general idea is acceptable to people in terms of another step for the railways. Practically, we don't know. But I think it shows why this man is so popular. He's actually sort of touched maybe an unconscious thing that people
do we
are
really
about.
know that people would want British Rail to come back, bearing in mind
Not
all
the
those
sandwiches.
the jokes that the stand-up comedians had about, as you say?
But you have to remember there's a generation who don't know anything about that. And that's part of what Jeremy Corbyn's tapping into as well. We'll see, because this will take years for this to happen.
And I also think, I mean, I don't know, I may be cynical, but it's like people are saying he's taking the Labour Party back 30 years. Is he taking them back to a halcyon past, which would be impossible to recreate?
Well, steam trains.
Well, steam trains with, you know, ruddy chaps pouring coal into the engine. I think the problem is so much has happened since we had British Rail. Is it possible to put the toothpaste back in the tube? I think it might not be.
But also, if we have an interest rate rise, people are paying interest-only mortgages, they say this will be catastrophic. So there may be a big discussion about rail fares and the rail.
Yeah, although, I mean, let's reflect the latest thinking from the Bank of England is not just zero interest rates,
Negative.
but minus negative
Yes,
interest rates.
Which is, they say most of the central banks.
So you're going to ask
that
for
is
money
a
back on your
culture.
rail ticket?
Well, it won't be good.
You've been ripping me off for 30 years. I want a refund.
Yeah, exactly.
It won't be a great thing.
Take me to Carlisle.
Exactly.
Right, let's take a look at... it's the front page of the Telegraph now is your next choice.